Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper, beginning with a constitutional crisis in Sri Lanka. And it's a very important topic for your international relations, which is part of your GS paper too. Now, let me give you a brief background of what this issue is all about and what this newspaper article is talking about. And we will analyze this newspaper article together with the editorial, which is titled Avoidable Crisis. So both this newspaper article and the editorial we shall be covering together. Now, Sri Lanka is a very important neighbor of India. And in 1980s, there was a huge crisis in Sri Lanka. Why? In 1983, an organization called LTTE, Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, they started a violent movement to overthrow the Sri Lankan rule in the northern and eastern part of Sri Lanka. Why? These areas were dominated by the Tamil minority, and LTTE felt that Tamils were discriminated against. There was lack of economic development in northern and eastern part of Sri Lanka dominated by the Tamils. Employment opportunities were not provided to the Tamil minority. In fact, their language was also not respected. And a violent movement started in 1983, and LTTE wanted to overthrow the Sri Lankan rule over the northern and eastern part of Sri Lanka. India, being a very important neighbor of Sri Lanka, India had to intervene in this crisis. Not only because Sri Lanka is placed at a very strategic position in the Indian Ocean, but also because of the fact that in an Indian state of Tamil Nadu, the Tamils are a majority, and under the influence of the political parties in Tamil Nadu, since Tamils were affected in Sri Lanka, the government of India had to intervene. And in fact, when Rajiv Gandhi was the Prime Minister, a peacekeeping force was sent to Sri Lanka to maintain calm and peace in the Tamil affected areas. International Peacekeeping Force. But then what happened? The Sri Lankan government, headed by President Mahinda Rajapaksa in late 2000, what he did, he started an offensive. And he waged a war against LTTE in these northern and eastern part of Sri Lanka. And then ultimately LTTE was defeated, their leaders were arrested or killed, and LTTE accepted defeat. But Mahinda Rajapaksa was so brutal and so ruthless in this war against LTTE that gross human rights violations were perpetrated and committed against the citizens of this northern and eastern part of Sri Lanka. In fact, the United Nations says that the worst human rights violations ever to be committed on the soil was committed by the Sri Lankan government in these Tamil areas. But then what happened? Mahinda Rajapaksa not only presided over a ruthless government against the Tamil minority, but Mahinda Rajapaksa government was also authoritative. Lack of regard for human rights, lack of regard for press freedom, and ultimately some of the opposition political parties, they decided that we should gang up against Mahinda Rajapaksa, we should defeat electorally Mahinda Rajapaksa government so that we can have a government which will look after the interest of all the people of this country, so that the civil war is put to an end, so that the economic crisis that we are facing is put to an end, so that the peace and security is restored in the Sri Lankan island. Mahinda Rajapaksa's health minister was Matripala Sirisena. He resigned and he decided that I will contest elections against Mahinda Rajapaksa and I will be the next president of Sri Lanka and I will take Sri Lanka from the economic crisis into an era of economic prosperity and development. Matripala Sirisena was also supported by Ranil Wickremesinghe, and together they decided to contest the election and overthrow the despotic authoritative regime of Mahinda Rajapaksa, and they won the election as well. In 2015, they started and pioneered a unity government in Sri Lanka, with Matripala Sirisena as the President of Sri Lanka and Ranil Wickremesinghe as the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. But then over a period of time, differences grew between Ranil Wickremesinghe, the Prime Minister, and President Sirisena. And it took everybody by surprise when President Sirisena decided to withdraw support to Ranil Wickremesinghe. Ranil Wickremesinghe was removed as the Prime Minister and Mahinda Rajapaksa was sworn in as the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, which led to the fall of this unity government of Sri Lanka. But many people think that President Sirisena should not have done this. Why? Because in 2015, this unity government was supported by not just the people in the mainland of Sri Lanka, but also by the Tamil minority and Muslim minority groups. So this unity government was sworn in with much purpose, with much promise, with much faith that we are going to solve the long pending economic crisis in Sri Lanka because of this unity government. And what Mr. Sirisena has done, unilaterally, he decided to appoint his rival Mahinda Rajapaksa as the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. But Ranil Wickremesinghe, he makes a very important point. He says, how can I be removed as the Prime Minister despite the fact that I have a majority in 225 member house? If I do not command majority in the house, in the parliament, I can be removed on the floor of the house. But first allow me to prove the majority because I know I have the majority in the house. Mahinda Rajapaksa is saying I also have the majority. But what President has done? President has prorogued this house till November 16. That means the session of Sri Lankan Parliament is suspended, abolished, and now the Parliament will convene after November 16 only. And critics say this time is provided till November 16 by the President to Mahinda Rajapaksa so that horse trading can be effectively organized, so that some of the members of the parliament can be brought along the side of Mahinda Rajapaksa. This will be the violation of constitutional morality and constitutional propriety. The editorial in today's The Hindu newspaper talks about avoidable crisis. Editorial says that President Sirisena's decision, action have put Sri Lankan democracy in peril. What the editorial talks about? Editorial says that the best forum to test the political clout in a democracy, to test whether the majority is there for the government or not, this test can be conducted only on the floor of the legislature. An extra parliamentary power struggle, that too using illegal means, heightens the risk of political thuggery and unrest. That is what the Hindu editorial is talking about. And the Hindu editorial says, though much damage has already been done, a fair vote must be ensured when the parliament reconvenes, if possible, before November 16. That means the Hindu editorial calls upon the President of Sri Lanka to reconvene the parliament before November 16 so that Ranil Wickremesinghe can prove his majority on the floor of the legislature. And what today's newspaper article talks about? Speaker of Sri Lankan Parliament has urged the President that you have to protect Ranil Wickremesinghe's privileges as the Prime Minister. And in all likelihood, what Sri Lankan Parliament Speaker is saying, that Ranil Wickremesinghe is still the Prime Minister because unless and until he cannot prove his majority in the House, we cannot have a situation where a new Prime Minister is sworn in. Now there is a Chinese element also to this. China was the first country more or less to support the transition of power in Sri Lanka, and they welcomed the appointment of Mahinda Rajapaksa as the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. Because let's not forget, Mahinda Rajapaksa was very close to China, and it was during his tenure that China grew agonizingly very close to Sri Lanka, jeopardizing the Indian interests in Sri Lanka. And it was viewed that Ranil Wickremesinghe is very close to India. In fact, he was there in India recently, met the Prime Minister Modi as well, and it is going to be a setback to Indian interest in Sri Lanka. And that is why India has issued a carefully worded statement saying, "We urge the Sri Lanka to respect the democratic values and constitutional process." This is a very carefully worded statement coming out from the India. Now let's look at another newspaper article on page number 1 of the Delhi edition of the Hindu. Trump not to attend Republic Day event. Now this is an embarrassment for the government of India. Why? 26th January, when the Republic Day parade is celebrated and conducted and held, we normally invite the head of a foreign country to witness these proceedings. But normally first the invite is sent to the head of a foreign country. Then the head of this foreign country, he accepts this invite, and then this information is leaked to the press that a particular head of a particular country is going to be the guest of honor, chief guest at the Republic Day parade. But this time it is an embarrassment for the government of India, because first this news got leaked that Indian government is trying to invite President Donald Trump as the chief guest for Republic Day parade. And even without waiting for the confirmation of Donald Trump, the news got leaked that President Trump has decided not to attend the Republic Day event. Why? Because he has a crowded calendar. His calendar is so crowded that he cannot spare time to come to India and grace the Republic Day celebration parade on January 26. Now let's look at another important article, Robotic Trucks to help airlines save on aviation turbine fuel. Now let me briefly explain you what is the significance of this newspaper article and can be important for your science and technology, where the application of robotics can sometimes be asked in your examination. Now for example, this is the airplane. This airplane moves and then reaches the runway, and then the plane takes off. This journey is what we call taxiing. That means the plane is taxiing from its location, then reaches the runway and then takes off. Or there is a plane coming, landing on this runway and then taxiing to its destination. This journey of this plane from its location to the runway, it costs money because the fuel is used, ATF is used. What is the cost? Some estimates say that the cost of fuel burned during taxiing is 1600 rupees per minute. If it is a narrow body plane, a smaller plane. But if it is a wide body plane, let's say A380, then it is 3500 per minute. And according to estimate, if ATF is not burnt, if the fuel is not burnt in this taxiing process, then the airlines are going to save 20 billion rupees by 2021. And that's a big money. And what is now the innovation? Taxi bots can be used. So taxi bots, they are basically robotic trucks, and these robotic trucks will tow this plane from its location to the runway. And from this runway, the plane can take off, or the plane after it lands can be towed to its destination. That means no ATF will be burnt, cost will be saved, fuel will be saved, and the airlines will become profitable very soon as well. Now these taxi bots will be used for the first time at New Delhi's Indira Gandhi International Airport, and 2 airlines will carry out these tests. One is SpiceJet and the other is Jet Airways. So when the question is asked about the application of robotics, these taxi bots you can cite in your answers. Now let's look at another important news which is relevant for your environment and ecology. And this newspaper article talks about a More Falcon. Now what is an More Falcon? It is basically a migratory bird, and it is also called as a raptor. A raptor is basically a bird of prey. A preying bird is called a raptor. Now this Amur falcon is a fascinating migratory raptor. Why? Every year these birds, they make a voyage from their breeding grounds in Russia and Siberia and China, and they enter into West Africa. Now look at this journey. This journey is estimated to be close to 22,000 kilometers. And because of this long journey, stopover sites are required. Why stopover sites are required? Because it is very important from a More Falcon's perspective to maintain stamina. And one of these stopovers is the Nagaland region in India. What are we talking about? We are talking about More Falcon. What is an More Falcon? It is a migratory bird. It belongs to a category called raptor. And which are these raptors? Preying birds are called raptors. Now these More Falcons, they make a fascinating voyage from their breeding grounds in Siberia and also in China, Russia, and they make their journey, cross the Arabian Sea and move to West Africa or South Africa. But during this journey, which is close to 22,000 kilometers, Hindu says 20,000, some websites say 22,000. For example, there is a website called worldmigratorybirdday.org. It says that this journey is close to 22,000 kilometers. But during this journey, these birds do require some stopovers, and one of the stopover is Nagaland. And in Nagaland, we see close to 120,000 to 140,000 birds are trapped in nets, and they are killed while they pass through this remote area in Nagaland, because they are trapped and killed by the people. But then what happened? Indian government as well as the Nagaland Forest Department, they used patrols, conducted surveys, surveillance, and also educated the villagers that you should not trap these falcons because these falcons are migratory birds. You should not kill them. You should allow their free voyage to West Africa. And now this initiative has been successful. The villagers of Umru have come together to ensure a safe stopover for the flock of More Falcons. That is something which is very, very important for your prelims perspective. But let's look at some of the important details regarding More Falcon. Quick facts regarding More Falcon. They breed in southeast Russia and northern China. And as I said, they migrate westward through India. Then they cross the Arabian Sea. When they cross the Arabian Sea, they then enter into southern Africa. And these More Falcons, they feed on dragonflies. One important point for your prelims point of view is that these dragonflies, they also follow a similar migration path over Arabian Sea. The same migration path that is followed by More Falcons, that is also followed by the dragonflies, and these More Falcons, they prey on these dragonflies. What is the IUCN status of More Falcon? Least concern. Very important statement for your prelims. But then still there are some threats to More Falcon. One threat is trapping, which we have discussed. The other is habitat loss. And that is primarily because of degradation of grasslands. Now let us look at something which is very important for your prelim. Ambassadors. Who are these ambassadors? They are water birds, they are land birds or raptors. And they fly over different parts of the world. But they all face similar threats during their migration. For example, trapping, habitat loss, so on and so forth. And there are 7 flagship species under this category called ambassadors. Which are these 7 flagship species? You will have to memorize their names. And let us look at all these names one by one. Number 1, we have barn swallow. Number 2, black-tailed godwit. Number 3, More Falcon. Number 4, red knot. Number 5, gargany. Number 6, spoon-billed sandpiper. And number 7, yellow-breasted bunting. So if the question comes in the examination, which of the following are categorized as 7 flagship species? These are the 7 flagship species of ambassador class, and one of them is an More Falcon. Now let's look at another international news. Former president of Maldives is saying India has helped Maldives restore democracy. We have seen that there were elections to Maldives recently, and in these elections, opposition candidate Mohammad Ibrahim Soleh, he won against Abdullah Yameen. And Abdullah Yameen was very close to China. Abdullah Yameen was also, some people say, anti-India. So with the election of Mohammad Ibrahim Saleh, we can see that the old age, good relations between India and Maldives, they can continue. And the former president Mohammad Gayoom, who is also part of that opposition alliance which won the election against Abdullah Yameen, Abdul Gayoom is saying that India has helped a lot. India and other international players, they have put pressure on the Maldives government, and Maldives government has now ensured that democracy is restored in Maldives. And former President Abdullah Gayoom is also saying that what happened during the presidentship of Abdullah Yameen, that is not going to change the traditional Maldives policy of India first. So this is a welcome statement coming from Abdul Gayoom, who is part of the opposition alliance which won the election to Maldives recently. And you need to understand that increasingly our neighborhood is becoming more and more interesting and exciting. We have seen that in Maldives, a pro-India government is coming to power. And in the neighboring country of Bangladesh, we have seen that Sheikh Hasina, who is the Prime Minister of Bangladesh and very close to India, she is now controlling the politics of Bangladesh as well. In fact, today we will hear the verdict against the former Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Begum Khaleda Zia, and in all likelihood, she will be jailed and convicted by the Supreme Court in Bangladesh. And if that happens, then Begum Khaleda Zia cannot contest the elections to Bangladesh Parliament, and as such we can see that Sheikh Hasina will dominate the politics in Bangladesh for a long time to come. That is further going to be very, very helpful and beneficial for the Indian foreign policy, because Sheikh Hasina is closer to India than Begum Khaleda Zia. Now let us look at some of the editorials and columns in today's The Newspaper. One editorial talks about avoidable crisis, that is on the constitutional crisis in Sri Lanka, and we have discussed that. The other editorial, in the court of last resort, it talks about the Supreme Court's actions in the CBI case, where the CBI Director Alok Verma, CBI Special Director Rakesh Asthana, they both were levying charges against each other. What the government did, Alok Verma was sent on a leave, and critics say, opposition say, that Alok Verma was removed from the CBI primarily because of the fact that Alok Verma could have started investigation into the Rafale scam. And when Alok Verma was sent on a leave, he filed a petition in the Supreme Court, and in Supreme Court he asked a fundamental question: who appointed Alok Verma? CBI director is appointed by a collegium, by a panel consisting of Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition in Lok Sabha, as well as the Chief Justice of India. And according to Delhi Special Police Establishment Act, because it is this act which governs the functioning of CBI, this act says that CBI director cannot be removed without the permission of this committee which appointed him. And without mentioning this matter before this committee, the government unilaterally decided 2 a.m. in the morning that Alok Verma will be sent on a compulsory leave, and a new interim director was appointed to the CBI. Then the matter reached the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court clipped the wings of that interim chief and said this interim director cannot take any major decision. What Supreme Court also said, that CVC will conduct an investigation into all the charges that have been leveled against Alok Verma, and CVC has to conduct this investigation within 2 weeks. And so far as this investigation by CVC is concerned, CVC will be supervised by the retired judge of the Supreme Court. A retired judge of the Supreme Court, Mr. A.K. Patnaik, will supersede the investigation by CVC into all those allegations leveled against Alok Verma. So in all likelihood, what Supreme Court has done, it has clipped the power of CBI interim chief. It has brought CBI under the control of the Supreme Court. It has brought even CVC under the direct control of the Supreme Court appointed former judge of the Supreme Court, A.K. Patnaik. And this editorial talks about that Supreme Court's action in the CBI case underlined the gravity of the institutional crisis that we see in CBI. There is another important column on India-Japan relationship, but we will have an elaborate video on India-Japan relationship after Prime Minister is back from his visit to Japan. Now let's look at some of the prelims-based questions from today's newspaper. Which strait separates Sri Lanka from India? Park Strait. Which countries have coastline on the Black Sea? This is the map. You can have a look at it. And the answer is 1, 2 and 4. Previous year's question paper 2012. Since Prime Minister was removed in Sri Lanka, let's have a question on the Prime Minister of India. The Prime Minister of India at the time of his or her appointment need not necessarily be a member of one of the houses of the parliament, but must become a member of one of the houses within 6 months. That means an individual, even if he or she is not a member of Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, can still be appointed as the Prime Minister, but within 6 months, this individual has to be elected to either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. In England, the situation is different. In order to be appointed as the Prime Minister, you should be a member of the lower house of Indian Parliament, House of Commons. Let's look at the main special, and today we are providing you with 2 essay topics. And please write an essay on these topics and you can send it to us. You can also drop in under the comment section. Leadership is not about individual brilliance. Second topic, the combination of casualness and cruelty is not pleasant. That is it for now from today's The Hindu newspaper analysis. Thank you for being with us. Have a great day.